So yes, I'm from Transport for London. And I'm the head of experience. I lead the design team that looks after the digital channel, all of the channels actually. And we are sort of part of a very large technology team. And here we are. I brought some pictures just to give you a bit of an idea. So as you would expect, there's a lot of collaboration. We're doing lots of design work. We're working with universities. We're creating apps. We're constantly sort of evolving and doing interesting things, and it's a very, very nice place to work. We created this space over the last 3 years. It's the first sort of proper in-house digital team. That was a huge step forward for Transport for London, because previously we were mainly sort of working with suppliers and agencies, and now we have a proper in-house team. I do like to have credits, and I do think we need film credits in service design, don't you think? So obviously my team, they're all very shy, and they don't like their photos to be taken. So I created these kind of film credits, and this is sort of what they're working on at the moment. These are not all people who are still there. Some people have left, some people work with us occasionally. My boss is on this list as well. The point that I'm trying to make here is that over the last 3 years, these are the designers and these are the names of the designers who have been really shaping the new products that are coming out now and the products that you'll see in the future. Obviously, we're really small in the context of Transport for London, so there are 20,000+ people working for Transport for London, and I didn't have enough space on that screen. Sorry, I need to go back. So it's very, very big, and I don't really want to talk about Transport for London that much in terms of how we're structured, how we changed everything. There's a lot to talk about, and if you're really interested in this, you can catch me afterwards. I keep doing this. And ask me all the questions that you may have. But what I really wanted to talk about a little bit is what we do when we design things, and what it means to design something. So rather than talking about the complexity of a transport system, for now at least, I'd like to talk about something really simple, and that's a chair. So think about the chair you're sitting on right now. Like, how does it feel? Yeah, have a look. Have you looked at the chairs you're sitting on? They're quite clever. You can connect them. It's quite clever. Any other sort of interesting observations? Have a look. Feel it for a minute. It's a really simple object that we're really used to. We're sitting on chairs all the time. So it's very straightforward to talk about chairs. You would think. It's really, just one of those things we take for granted. So it's one of those things. It's like a toothbrush, or it's like a glass that you drink water from. It's one of those objects that we just have come accustomed to and that we use every day. But of course, it's not that simple. Chairs, come in hundreds and thousands of versions. There are chairs that are square, there are chairs that are made out of wood, there are chairs that are made out of fluffy materials, a bit warm at the bottom, and they all have a very particular purpose, or, they come from a very particular sort of perspective, and they're very important, all of them, in their own unique way. So chairs are not straightforward. It's quite important to have all of these chairs. Look at all of these chairs, and that's just the object. That's just the product, which may be warm, which may be fluffy, which may be smooth, and so on. Now, adding a bit of service design to it, you can arrange these chairs. You can put them next to each other. You can put them in front of each other. You can make a little circle with them. Yeah. You can let people sit in a particular way on them. So it gets more and more complex. So chairs are really complex design space. Just like forks, we take forks for granted, don't we? But what really are forks? Forks are very strange objects, if you think about them. Are they like little arms with a hand on them? Bruno Munari here played with that idea and just kind of let them talk, let the fork talk to you. There's nothing straightforward about a fork. It's incredibly difficult to produce one. There's no reason for it. There's no need for having a fork. There are also, as I said, so many ways to use these objects. You can slide on them, you can sit on them, you can stand on them, you can sleep on them, and so on. So design really is not so much about solving problems. And I think that's really important. Because we get really hung up about problems and needs and solving issues and saving the world and changing the world and all of that. But actually, I believe that most of design is not about this at all. Now, accidentally, you may solve some problems, hopefully. Hopefully, you're not creating any. Although sometimes people do. So what is it that we do when we design things? We're creating connections, and we're creating combinations, and we're creating things that allow new experiences, that allow us to see things differently, to experience things differently, to connect to the world differently. And that's where that richness comes from. That's where a chair is not a chair. It's not just a chair. It's a chair that you sit on when you're sitting in some corner in your living room. It's a particular chair. It's this particular chair that you're sitting on right now here that allows you to look at me and talk to each other and sit next to each other and so on. It's creating a space. It's creating a particular moment for you. And that's really, really important not to forget. So now apply that to TFL. It's getting even more complex. So yes, it's about how robust something is, how fluffy, how warm, how smooth, how waterproof, how clever. And of course, we, throughout our history, we didn't just sort of stick to the chairs and the forks and the toothbrushes, but industrialization really brought about some very strange looking things, like silos for grains, like factories, like airplanes, like water, systems of all kinds. And for the longest time, architects and urban designers have been grappling with this, just like industrial designers have. What is this relationship that we have with these things that were created? And what does it mean to design in an environment where objects are really complex, difficult to manufacture, where buildings are becoming more and more sort of become bigger, larger, more difficult to implement at a mass scale. So really, a lot of that brutalist architecture that we're familiar with. What's interesting about this, there's a real tension there around how do you do this? How can you create sort of spaces and places? In architecture, there's a lot of debate about it, and you may be familiar with that. How do we live in these spaces? How do we live in these little cubicles and carve out our own little individual life? And of course, over the years, there were architects who were questioning this. This is Jan Gehl, the human scale, you may know this. And people started to talk about the fact that actually life happens sort of in these new infrastructures. And when life happens at a human scale. So if you have a very large building and you're standing on top, you can see the airplanes, which is a very new experience. It's great, it's a new perspective. You can look at the sky. You will be very lonely by yourself, very likely. You can't sort of shout out at the bottom, get the kids back for lunch. That's impossible. Yeah. So you see here how infrastructure is overlaid with human experience. And this analysis and this understanding of what infrastructure does to us is something that is very important to my work every day. So suddenly then design becomes about how noisy something is, how open something is, how stunning it is. Obviously safety, busyness, and all of these kind of slightly intangible terms. Using infrastructure, just to give you another example that we use quite a bit is, it's an interesting topic. So here you have the roads, again, industrialization, highways, roads, streets in general, cars. You're using the car and you're speeding and you're kind of going somewhere, and you need to orient yourself. You need to know where you're going, and you need to know where you have to turn left or right. And these are not easy things to design. So the road sign project in the UK was a very, very important project for information design, because what they really had to achieve was to make something legible within about 4 seconds at an angle of 15 degrees and an average speed of 70 miles per hour. So there you go. We come across this a lot. We're working on displays right now, digital displays, and we found that actually it's okay if people don't look at those displays. Because what they do is they have a certain light, and just having the light on gives people reassurance. Just being in a station and walking by, you have no time, but knowing that there's this light and it has a certain color, which shows a certain color, it's the blue, and that gives you reassurance. It's these little subtleties. So this brings me to really huge things. All of this has to do, so industrialization, manufacturing, engineering, all of this resulted in massive cities. We have huge cities now. London has 10 million inhabitants, more or less, just below, to kind of shift a little bit, but about kind of 10 million. And we're among the sort of 21 global cities. And we're sort of a smaller one. We're like, we're just at the beginning of being a massive global city. We were really, in comparison to, say, Tokyo, we're nothing, absolutely nothing. Tokyo is like 3 times as big. So how does this work, this city? How? What is this? What is it? How did we get there? All these train lines, look at it, it's a mess. And it's always been sort of a mess. In the beginning it was a smaller mess, now it's a really big mess. And don't underestimate what this does to your life and how you live your life, and what it, just let this kind of sink in for a minute. But I really encourage you to think about your own experiences with cities and living in big places like that. Luckily, in London we had this person, Frank Pick. He lived sort of, he was working in various sort of positions between the 2 world wars. And at several times he was responsible for the sort of the marketing and the wayfinding systems and so on and so on. And interestingly, very early on, so he really understood that cities are more than just buildings, that cities are more than just engineering and lines and getting more trains out. So he was responsible for, at one point he was the chief executive of the London Passenger Transport Board. So he was not a designer himself. Yeah, that's very important. He was responsible for the trains and the transport system. So he had a very important role to play. And but he understood design really well. And one of the things that he did was he basically introduced the idea that the city needs to be usable, and that in order for it to be usable, you need to really understand what the city is. And this is really where this map originated. So this, you probably know the story, I don't know, but Harry Beck developed this initially to sort of just see whether he could make it simpler and so on. But I think what's very important about this map is it's not that it's simple and minimal, and I took all the labels out and we're still working on making it more minimal. But that's not the point of this map. The point of this map, oh, now I have to find this interesting light. Here you go, there you go. The point of this light is, yes, whew, light. Just like flowing water out of the faucet. I like these things, like water out of the faucet, little inventions. Anyway, there you go, there it is. So this area there, you see this area? So if you don't know London, you may not know this. But let me go back to this one. So, if I point at it, it doesn't help, does it? No. Sorry, I'm completely lost. All right. This area here is literally in the nowhere. It's in the woods. It's in the Chilterns. Have you heard of the Chilterns? It's lovely there. It's green. Nobody goes there. You know. And now we, of course, next year will launch the Elizabeth line, which you may know. And it will go even further. It'll be somewhere, you know, again, taking the light thing. And I'm showing you where it goes. Where is it? There it is. It's not there, it's not there, it's not there, it's not there, it's not, it's going somewhere else. It's out of this picture, I believe. The point made is that what this map did, this map, it kind of, for the first time in the 30s, sort of suggested that when you live in the woods, you're still a Londoner. Yes. It's fine. And you know, and if you live outside of this, if you're living in Reading in 2020, it will be absolutely fine. You'll still be a Londoner. So that's the idea of this map. And then in the 30s, another huge invention. Not only were you on the map, but you could put it in your pocket. That was really new. That was really new. You could just kind of fold it into a tiny little thing, almost like a smartphone. You could put it in your pocket, and everybody could have like their own little pocket map. Carry it around and kind of take it out and go like, look, I'm in London. I live over there. Yeah. So that's so this is, you know, it's a little story, but there are researchers, like serious researchers, who research urban, urban history and so on, who do believe that this map was one of the reasons why people started to consider moving out to areas that they previously didn't consider to be part of the city. So for the first time, sort of people said, okay, so as long as it's on the tube, as long as I kind of get into a find a tube stop, tube station, and I can use the tube, I'll be fine and I'll be part of the city. I could probably live there. So it really changed the dynamics of the city, and it really changed how the city works. So do not underestimate what you're doing when you're designing little things, little touch points, you know, little minute little things you're coming up with have a huge impact on how things work, even big cities. So going back to Frank Pick, a lot of the design, the iconic design that you know about London, comes from this philosophy. So this logo, this kind of logo, is not only a logo of the London Underground, it is also, of course, you would say, the wayfinding system. It's part of the wayfinding system. So for the first time, what Frank did was he was standardizing all the signage for all the underground stations so people could actually find them when they were on the street. This is huge. So you could just walk down the street, and from far you could see this roundel, and you can say, oh, you're there's my tube station that gets me out into the woods. And it's amazing. It's such a little thing, but, you know, and I know you kind of know this as designers, obviously you know this, but let's just, again, take a step back and think about it. For the first time, it was possible for people to just walk randomly on a street and find this thing that would get them somewhere else and really far away, very fast. This is what makes the city work, and so does the typeface. For the first time, Frank Pig commissioned, a very famous calligrapher and typographer called Edward Johnston. In 2014, he commissioned in 1914 and 1916. This typeface was created, and and it works. It made it legible. Previously, before this typeface was there, the stations were plastered with all varieties of type. It was hard to distinguish where you were going. Had a hard time reading it. Here you have suddenly something that is very legible, very working very well, very unifying, and it allows you to really understand what you're doing when you're using the tube. And you know what? It lasted for 100 years, and it's still ongoing. It's a very good typeface. Monotype just redesigned it slightly to make it work a little bit better for digital, kind of the digital world. But it's there, and we're still working with it, and it's so simple, in a way, so basic, so foundational to who we are. So. Here the same, again, a tube station. So this is London Bridge. This is the infrastructure again. So another part of what Frank Pig did, and various designers subsequently, based on that sort of approach, was to say, tube stations are not damp. They are not dark. They're not just tunnels that you get into to kind of get somewhere. They're not just sort of there. They are actually public space. These are the spaces, the bubbles, the areas we live in. This is not, just about how big it is or how fast it is or how efficient it is. It's actually somewhere where you can sort of sleep. You know this. On the tube, Yeah. Putting your shoulder on someone, and it's that movement, isn't it? It's very soothing. Yeah? It's interesting. Don't you find that interesting that there are so many pictures? This is, it's like street photography. This is from Bob Mazur, who did lots of photography in London around the tube, the use of the tube. A lot of it I can't show because it's outrageous. But what's interesting is, you all know this, I think. You're on the bus, you're on a tube, and you're just, you're going home, and it's that sort of specific experience that you have. This is our life. We're just we're reading, we're sleeping, we're kind of rubbing shoulders with other people. And every mode has a different experience. When you're in the car, it's all about independence and doing whatever you like and bringing your home with you, all your little things. Yeah? And it feels just like you're stepping with your pajamas out of your house. You just get into your car and nobody can do anything to you because you're in your little house thing that you can drive away with. But you can't do this. You can't rub shoulders with others. In fact, most people don't. That's why they drive cars, because they don't want to do this. But there are also lots of people who actually really enjoy this. It's being part of that social fabric of a city. And, every transport mode has that very unique experience attached to it. Bicycles. Bicycles are being flexible, being being a bit of a rogue kid. Look, I can do this without arms. I can ride my bike without arms. All right, I need to be a bit faster. Okay, so yeah, and then of course we all know this, music in the subway, music in the tube, the lighting, all of that. So Frank Pig captured that, and he understood this, and and the design culture within TfL is all about this. We do know this, and we know that travel more is indeed, to travel more is to learn more, as it says on that sign up there. And that is really what drives our design thinking and the way that we design things. It's about making, be understanding that by providing this transport service, we're part of the city. And, it's about looking at the city, making it possible to look at London, look at those funny figures, you have to go left to right. So left to right, yes, hello, we're here. You can see London. Next, yes, you can get fabulous fresh fruits at Brixton Market. We will get you there. Next, it has something to do with the universe. We think, this is a poster by Man Ray, by the way, interestingly, because lots of famous illustrators and artists worked for TfL, so something to do with something. And it's big, it's Jupiter. And then, of course, it would be really good if the ticket machines were easier to use. Obviously, that's part of it, but it doesn't drive everything. It's not all about solving problems. And it's about other things. It's about circles and diamonds. And this is public art. I don't know, London Underground has a lot of public art. We have art on the Underground, and it's amazing. And it's about bringing the areas, the neighborhoods, the histories of Londoners into the tube, into the stations, onto the buses. This is a piece that's up right now at Brixton, Brixton Station. And it's about the Windrush generation. And the London Underground is that. It is sort of a public space, and it is part of our city. And so really what I would like to say is infrastructure is culture. It is really that. Infrastructure creates culture, and so do objects, and so do typefaces, and so on and so on. Yeah? But very importantly, also infrastructure creates culture. Now, let's talk a little bit, because I know we don't have much time, about digital. So what we've seen, oh my God, what we've seen is there. What we've seen in 2016, we did a Wi-Fi pilot. I don't know how many people know about this, but basically we tracked people's MAC. Well, we didn't track them. We collected people's MAC addresses at certain Wi-Fi access points throughout stations, and so on. And we made this very transparent. We did this very transparently. We informed everyone. We said, guys, let us know if you have a problem with this. And actually, it turned out nobody in London had a problem with it at that time. That may change. But anyway, we tried this, and it wasn't me. Just making sure. But what was interesting about it was, the interesting findings from this were that people use the network in very highly individual ways. And this was something that we didn't know. We kind of knew where people get in and where people get out. And we kind of had these huge assumptions about which route they would take throughout the network. And what we found that a lot of these assumptions weren't right. Actually, it was a lot more sort of diverse, and many people took very interesting routes, which we're trying to still understand. And we have this idea that it's probably, a mix of individual preference, that it has to do with comfort, of course, with quietness, with, who they know at a certain station and meet perhaps on the way, and so on and so on. But what it shows is that individualism is very important, and that it drives what we do, what we're able to do in the city. Being able to have individual choice, and I'm not talking about personalization in that sense of, saying hello to customers and making sure things are sort of addressed to them and so on. What I'm talking about is having options and actually being able to use the city in the way that you want to use it. And this behavior shows us that people really do that already and want to have tools that they can do this with. And so it's about being with people. This is so. At the moment, we have no app. I don't know if you know this, but there is no app. There's no TfL app. There is an Oyster app, but there is no travel app. And what we do is we use existing channels to tap into those individual journeys. So for example, for a long time we listened to social media and we try to understand when are people using the cycle superhighways. When are they, we have the cycle superhighways in London where you can basically cycle for a long time, you know, from a, you know, it's a long distance and it's just for cyclists and it's signposted and so on. It's a particular concept, you can look it up, it's working really well. And we would kind of understand who's doing it, and we would take part in those moments. So this is a father who took his son to ride on one of those cycle superhighways, and we just said, great, this is amazing, thank you so much for using this infrastructure that we built for you. But also it's about sort of making people aware of that infrastructure. So here we have someone who's cycling to work and who didn't know that there was a cycle superhighway, so we let him know that there's a cycle superhighway by, again, listening and sending him a PDF of the route and so on. So it's about just being with people. And also, of course, it's about participation, so it's about inviting people to work with us on making it better. So this was a project, these yellow lines, it's very specific to London, I think, but these yellow lines indicate that it's a mixed use of the road, so you can sort of walk across and you can kind of use it together. Anyway, it was a slightly difficult junction and people were complaining about it, and we listened to them and we collected all the feedback, and together with that group of people over Twitter, we actually initiated, Matt, our community manager at that time, he initiated that these yellow lines were painted on the road. So it actually changed that particular junction. So this is what we do. Even our designers participate. So this is one of the designers who was on that list of credits. She's done lots of work for us. And here she is with her tandem bike, and she's posting blog posts about it and so on. So it's, you know, we're part of the city and we're part of that. Now, really quick, for the longest time, we've done no interface design. Yeah, we haven't really. We've used Twitter. We've used, we've used the website. Of course, we have a responsive website. Yeah, okay, but we don't really do UI. Yeah, we don't do UI design. But what we do a lot of is data, and and what is data, and what are algorithms? So there are obviously algorithms as well, and what is it? It's this. So this is Margaret Hamilton, who sort of wrote all of this. She was a programmer for MIT, and she prevented the Apollo mission to be aborted. And she did this by writing all of this code. And but it kind of illustrates really well, I think, what it is. It's text. That's all it is. It's genius, and she's very, very clever, as you can see. But I wouldn't be able to do this. I doubt that any of you would be able to do this. Correct me if I'm wrong. But really, so what we're talking about is, but as designers, we can make it possible for everyone to do something with data and with algorithms. And that's by creating user interfaces. It's as simple as that. That's the first Macintosh desktop. It was absolutely, fundamentally revolutionary, as you know. I mean, look at it. You can just put numbers in and it calculates a number, another number. You can slide the slider and it makes it loud and quiet. We take this for granted. This is absolutely amazing. You can see, nowadays you can see a blue dot of yourself on a map. It's amazing. So, anyway, point made. That's what we're working on. We're working on introducing that sort of thinking into the organization and actually doing proper UI design to make the city more usable. I have to go. I have to go.
Hanna, stay with us. Stay with us. We ran a bit over time, but I would still like to. You gave us lots of food for thought, so I would like to open the discussion for one or two questions. You will be around here for the day, so approach her over coffee or during lunch. 1, 2 questions from the audience? There's one over here.
Can you grab it? Hi. First of all, thank you for the presentation. It was really nice to see the long story of the tube and all those little details we are not really aware of today. But what is the challenge you are currently facing? What is the thing now you? Yeah.
Does it? Yeah. Okay. So yes, challenges are plenty. Yeah. So a growing city, growing congestion, and car use is declining, but it's still far too much. There's far too much traffic. So air quality is a huge challenge for us in the city. We have. Our network is still not fully, it's very accessible, but further improving inclusion and accessibility is a huge topic for us. Safety, obviously, is always a huge topic. Enabling new mobility services, digital first sort of mobility services that we may be able to use in order to make areas accessible that currently aren't covered by the network, because obviously if you're doing transport planning, that's very slow. It's usually thinking 20, 30 years ahead, and we're just not fast enough, so we need to be faster. We need to really be a lot more responsive to people's needs and so on. So it's huge. There's a lot to do. There's a lot to do.
Okay, thank you. So
if you want to know more challenges, you can ask me.
Yeah, for sure.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Yeah.
Was there another question?
Yeah, I have a question about, do you exchange with other cities
Yes.
about public transport? And do you have kind of idols?
Do we have?
Kind of idols? Something you want to achieve? What other cities already achieved?
China, very impressed by a lot of the digital services. Some of the Scandinavian cities, sort of in terms of mobility services, yeah. But yeah, we're working. We're looking at other cities. We're working with other cities. Again, we're a large organization. We're working with other cities. In many different forms. So yes. So there's a lot to learn from other cities for sure. And also vice versa. A lot of cities are still learning from us.